Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time with Kauffman, the comfortable place to talk about women's leadership. Today, I am here with Sarah Wills Carlsson as we discuss helping global engineering leaders and teams become more compassionate and inclusive while delivering results. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Maria.
Sarah Wills Carlsson is an experienced leader in engineering, automotive, electronics development, and a leadership coach who helps young engineering leaders to develop the confidence and leadership skills to be themselves and bring their best selves to their work as effective and compassionate leaders and team players. She helps leaders recognize that high-performance teams are much more powerful and all-encompassing than any single individual could ever be. But before we get into helping global engineering leaders and teams become more compassionate and inclusive while delivering results with Sarah, my name is Maria Kauffman, and I'm a life coach. And today I'm drinking a black cherry berry tea. What are you drinking, Sarah?
I've got water. I took a bike ride early this morning, so I need to hydrate some. This isn't coffee from the size of it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit later in the day. I've actually already had my coffee, so I'm on to my tea. That's one of those clues. I won't go a day without my coffee. So Sarah, help us understand some of your early signs of genius that led you onto your career path.
Well, I think it took me a while to understand what those early signs of genius were because they were kind of all over the place. I was good at math. I loved building things. The sand pile was one of my favorite places, building all kinds of structures. I also liked language and creativity. I was interested in studying other languages, like picking up that Gideon Bible that, is in every hotel room. I loved picking it up and reading the verse in every language and saying, "Mom, now I'm speaking Danish." And she would kind of laugh at me. But that fascinated me, looking at all the other languages and cultures. I also was into computers early. I had programmed on the Apple IIe and TRS-80, which really date me. I even had an old HP 85 computer in my room after my dad retired it and upgraded. I had it with the little tiny monochrome screen, and it was great fun. It had one computer game on it, and I could make basic programs that would make the printer run and different things.
Cool. I
love traveling and the countries and cultures and things. So I was a bit all over the place. And I think it took me a lot of years to understand that I never really had that one single defining focus that kind of a lot of my classmates and peers had.
Well, it's interesting because as you talk about it in this way, for me, I get this idea that you were like really exploring the world in a lot of ways. It sounds like travel was part of that. And you were open to anything, language, playing in the sandbox, right? So whenever you're really young, you don't understand necessarily that, this could actually lead to a career and maybe even what that career would be called. I know I didn't really know about engineering in those really early ages, right? So it's interesting, and it sounds like life was fun for you.
It was. I mean, of course, there are always the tough things. I mean, I was a little kid on the outside, too. I was definitely a tomboy. My best friends in early ages tended to be boys because, hey, they were a lot more fun. And, I liked riding bicycles and looking at trains and building campers out of wagons and hooking them up to the bikes to travel around. So I kind of liked a lot more maybe adventurous things. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I found really defined my kind of childhood in me was curiosity. I really just wanted to understand and experience a whole lot of different things.
Yeah, awesome. So as that was, you're getting out of those elementary school years and into the high school years, what are some things that you're starting to notice on, maybe your interest in school, maybe even out of school? How did that go for you?
Well, like in high school, I'd say, I was very achievement based, all the steps and doing as much as I could and getting good grades and, the highest academic curriculum I could do, I did. Interests photography was a way for me. I'm pretty shy and an introvert, and being behind the camera was a way to join all kinds of things. And I also liked the dark room back in those days before we had digital photography, but the chemical aspects of it, to do the processing and watch the image appear, but also the art of how you could play with the lights and darks and different things. So photography was kind of my way to be a part of things, because I was a bit of an outsider, I'd say, bit of a nerd, and, maybe not, I definitely wasn't in the popular group or so. And I was thinking about photojournalism initially, because like my love of travel and experiencing the world, my dream at one point was the National Geographic photographer, hopping around the world with my backpack and my camera. But I started thinking a lot about the ethics of it, and the photographs that tended to win the most awards and get the most attention and things they tended to be other people's misery. If you think about some of the most famous pictures, the one that comes to mind is the Syrian child washed up on the beach. And it was, I don't want my life to be about this. I don't want my life to be winning off of others' kind of misery and unhappiness. And so I started to question that a lot. And I really wanted to get out of Indiana. I grew up in a small town, factory town in Indiana, and I wanted to get out of it. And, our state universities, Purdue and IU, they were good, but they were too close to home. And so I really wanted to go to Northwestern, which, in retrospect wasn't super far from home, but Chicago to Indiana, it's a world of difference. And when I was looking at universities, my father, who was an engineer, he talked to me a lot that, journalism, you don't make a lot of money. You'd have a hard time paying student loans. He was a pretty practical guy. And I kind of, okay. And he started introducing me to some programs in engineering through his work and various mentors. And I started to see, here are some women that, wow, they like languages and different things, but they're also an engineering leader. And so I had a deal with him that I could go to Northwestern if I took the first year in engineering, and then I could study anything I wanted, but I could, and otherwise it was a state school.
Wow. Well, I find it interesting that you share a story where you're running into women in engineering leaders, on your path. So not only did you have the influence from your father being an engineer, having his perspective, his influence also in probably many ways.
I also had him bringing home really cool cars all the time because he worked for General Motors, and he had the first electronic climate control. He had the first automotive communication bus, which he and a colleague had invented on an airplane, and the first phone in the car, and all kinds of things that was a part of my childhood and background, that it was just, there was all this cool stuff.
Wow. That is really interesting.
So combined with that, it was like, this is kind of interesting stuff. And then when I started seeing a way I could pull languages in, I could pull other cultures, there was a lot of travel. So it's like, okay, I just really wanted to get out of Indiana. So, I took whatever I could to go to Northwestern. But then when I started taking some of the classes, particularly the elementary electrical engineering logic, the AND gates, the OR gates, all of that, I loved it. And it was like, but I can also I took French, Spanish, German, I took economics, I took sociology, but I also, I took really cool engineering classes, and I liked that a lot, that I could take both.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like the whole world was just a playground for you.
Pretty much. Yeah. It still is.
Well, to help us then, so then as you're deciding on where to go, not only where to go, but how was the decision on what to study for you in college? How did that come about?
Well, it was kind of engineering, and I knew I'd never been a very mechanically inclined person. Like, when I try to hammer, I pound my hand, and I have a little trouble with how things fit together. And I really wasn't super interested in chemistry. Like, I don't know if it was just the class I had in high school, but chemistry never really excited me. But I always liked computers. I mean, they were part of my room growing up, and I'd programmed and things. So it was kind of, I guess it was what I knew, but it was also what I felt kind of the most interesting too.
Awesome. And then, so how was college experience like for you once you got into studying that stuff?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was tough because I went to like a small rural Indiana high school, and then you're at Northwestern with kids from like Choate and Lawrenceville and the big suburban schools. And it's like, whoa, I thought I studied in high school when I actually brought my backpack home and opened a book. And so the first quarter was tough because, learning to study at an academic university level, I hadn't really worked very hard until that point. And so I had a tough first quarter, but I'm pretty stubborn. And I also want to succeed. So I just learned to study and also found good groups of people to study with. There were a couple study partners in various points that through the classes really helped me a lot because we could discuss, it gave some discipline too. And it was also more social than just, sitting in your room alone, working problems and equations, that you could sit with somebody and, oh, what did you get? What did you get? And discuss it. And because there were a lot of Friday and Saturday nights, my friends in other majors were out having fun and partying, and I was doing problem sets.
So it was kind of an interesting social atmosphere for an introvert.
Yeah. Yeah. And I joined a sorority during my sophomore year, which I hadn't really thought, that I was so much a sorority type. But I actually joined for the very practical reason of I needed housing when I did co-op engineering. And sororities were always trying to fill the house. So it was a good way to get housing. But I ended up, I went with it was the non-sorority sorority. It was an elite one. It was kind of a one. If you showed up, you were eligible to join almost. And at the time, I wasn't super comfortable with that. It's kind of, I ended up with the not so great one. But they were women that through my life have inspired me tremendously, whether it was through the studying, through the people I met. And even today, some of my biggest helpers and supporters and friends are women from that group.
Oh, that is so cool. So I would imagine a little bit of a mix. So you're finding other women engineers or similar studies?
It was a mix. I mean, a lot of people did. In fact, I'm working on a book right now, and my editor is from the sorority, and somebody who I believe she studied English and Spanish and elementary education. And now she's helping me edit my book. And another is helping me with marketing, who studied marketing and business, speech.
That is priceless.
Yeah, I have a tremendous network of friends just kind of right there.
Naturally.
And the greatest thing is they've been with me through a lot of the ups and downs. And like one of them, very different fields of study, but we both run a small business right now. So we can commiserate with the challenges of it.
That is so cool. So then what was that like? So you had, it sounds like a very rich, college education. You came in to support with some strong, like-minded students or colleagues. So what was it like as you were graduating college and starting to think about where you're going to go or what you're going to do to get paid or start a career?
Well, I'd co-opted in engineering because that was another that I knew about because of my dad, and partially for my financial reasons, but also for the experience and to try to figure out what did I want to take in my upper level classes. I co-opted. So, of course, I had an opportunity with the co-op company, which was the employer in my hometown, the big one. It was a subsidiary of General Motors at the time. It was their electronics division. Back at that point, it was called Delco. And they did all the vehicle electronics for General Motors. My dad ended up working 43 years in the company. I co-opted there. And just a lot because of convenience. It was in my hometown. I could live at home when I co-opted. And it was a cool company. They did some really cool stuff, like some early vehicle navigation and active safety and things. So it was, again, another playground of all the different areas. So I rotated. I ended up taking 4.5 years to graduate, and I did 3 6-month co-op assignments. So I got, I think it was 5 different areas I worked in before I graduated. And that helped a lot for me to kind of shape, what do I like working with? You know, what do I want to take in those upper level engineerings once you get into the electives? Because, you know, you can take fields, you can take communications, you can take computer architecture and programming. What is it you take? And
Yeah,
so
I
that
found this.
helped guide all that.
Yeah, awesome. Because I had a similar thing. I wanted to do co-op for a couple of reasons. I kind of wanted to know what I was getting into with a career. You know, it was nice because I had the opportunity also to get paid, you know, so I needed a lot of financial support getting through college, you know, myself. And it exposed you to things that, you know, I didn't even know that I didn't know these things that I wanted to even ask questions about. So I found co-op to be really, really important that way.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And it's fun because it taught me the very important thing of the 3-letter acronym. Because I remember my first assignment, I came home for lunch and had lunch with my dad. And he's, how's your day going? And I'm like, nothing I learned in school applies to this. And I had a list of like 25 3-letter acronyms that I was like, I don't know what, you know, all these things mean. And he looked at the list and he said, he picked out about a third of them. And he said, he told me what they were. And then he said, the other 2/3, it must be specific to that team and area. Oh. And so it really helped me after that, because then I was just, okay, I don't need to know this. I can actually ask, and I can just, okay, I haven't heard that one before. What is it? And you could almost be a little funny with them sometimes too, because you could, well, I know this one as one thing, but I don't think that's what you mean here. And then, so it instead of going for feeling like really, really bad that I didn't know something, it helped me to see every time you change areas, everywhere you go, there's a language. Yeah. It helped me years later when I was working with an active safety team and came in and they started talking about, I think it was ADE and PMP. And I was like, what are those? And then it turned out it was the registration number on the car. But they just referred to them by ADE and PMP. And
you're thinking, oh, this must stand for something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. Interesting. And nice. It's nice to have that perspective and that influence from your dad once again. Yeah. Just to kind of open up that, because that is a lot of times. I know I was in that position where, you know, the conversation led in a way that you kind of feel like you should be born with this knowledge somehow, and like asking, you know, the question, you know, kind of comes with a little bit of resistance, and maybe sometimes it's playful, but just to have that freedom to be like, oh, I can always just make fun of this situation. I can always just ask more questions. That's really important.
Yeah, because for me early, I wanted to be perfect and know everything, and a lot. I mean, you know, in a lot of the teams I went into, I was the only woman, and you know, some people were like, "Oh, you shouldn't be here, or you're only here to find somebody to marry," or you know, the comments that go around, and it's like, I felt a real pressure to be perfect in things too, and it's like those little things help to loosen some of that up, because the pressure was quite high.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were getting exposure, it sounds like, in co-op to some of these groundbreaking technologies that were really in their infancy and being developed. Did you know at that time too that, you know, something was going on here? Was there an interest that was sparking? Help us understand how you grew your career.
Well, I guess we can talk about how I picked my job. I had quite a few different offers when I came out of undergrad. I didn't interview with a lot of companies. I was pretty selective because I had the good opportunity with my co-op company. And then I looked at Motorola in Austin, and I was selected for a leadership development program there. It was really interesting and attractive to me. And I also had an offer from Intel, which it was an interesting experience interviewing with Intel because they kept pushing me in the interview and I almost cried in one section. And I was like, that was the worst interview I've ever been in. And the funny thing was, when I got back to Chicago after the interview on Monday, I got a call and got a job offer from the same guy that had pushed me like crazy. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you sound surprised. And I said, well, I didn't think the interview went well. He's like, no, it's fantastic. I wanted to find your breaking point, and it was quite far. But I decided Intel probably wasn't for me. If they were trying to find my breaking point in the
interview.
Yeah. That probably wasn't a good match, even if I love Sacramento, California, and thought it was pretty cool. But I was really kind of down between the Motorola and then I loved the technology that they had in the Delco division. I wasn't real keen to go back to my hometown. And that was really the big thing against it. But then some events happened. My mom moved out and left our family. And my sister was in her last year of high school. It was quite devastating for my father. I ended up deciding it wasn't the right time to take off. So I chose to go with a job in advanced engineering with Delco, and really had a lot of fun with it, being part of those emerging technologies. Like you ask about, how do you know if something's going somewhere? And I remember I was sent to a conference, one of my first years working on Bluetooth, a new technology. And I was asked when I came back to come up with various ideas for what we could do with Bluetooth. And I had the idea, what if you could charge the car with, say, music or content when you're at the gas pump? Now, this was back in, let's see, it must have been 1997. So I started thinking at that time, like, and I kept presenting all these things about gas pumps, because it's like, you have that downtime anyway, you pull off, and what if you could get a new CD, or what if you could get things? I mean, digital music even wasn't super big then, right? But I was thinking, like, what if you could get that? And then at one point, one of my bosses said to me, he said, I don't want to hear another thing about gas pumps. He's like, forget it, gas pumps, no. And I was like, I was so fascinated with this concept of what you could do in the time you were down, and how, like, wirelessly we could move something around. And so it was,
this is interesting.
Yeah. And the tough thing with working in the advanced world was I found I did a lot of projects that didn't go anywhere. Like, I worked really hard on a Japanese radio subcarrier project where we actually had to kind of reverse engineer, because we had the thing and I had the specs in Japanese, but I didn't have any help to decode the specs. So I had to look at the signals coming out and figure out what it was doing. And it was quite fascinating, but it's like, I got the whole thing to work, and then, it didn't go anywhere. And so I found, maybe advanced isn't so much for me. I started having some of those thoughts. And then we had a program that came in with a German customer in Munich, and they needed somebody who was willing to travel to work with the customer and work with a pretty big team. I think we had 30, 40 people working on it in the office. And I was like, me. And luckily, nobody else really who was more experienced wanted to go. They had kids, they had families, they didn't like foreign food or whatever. So I got to go, and I got to go for a month in Munich. I lived in a small flat that, some of the student workers there lived in, and had a company car, and it was fantastic. It was the best experience. Like, I went into work, and each day at work, it was like, what does the customer mean? What do they want? How can I figure that out? And then how can I take it back to the team so they can implement that? And then, negotiating too between, oh, that's crazy, they can't do that, to, well, how could we figure out how we could do something close to what they want? And so I started already then playing a role of a cultural bridge on projects that, I was so fascinated with the people I worked with and the team in Germany. I mean, they had beer and white sausages Friday morning in the office.
What's there not to love?
I mean, I don't really love either, but just the fact that they had them, it was so different from everything I knew. It was so fun. And then to get to try to figure out and understand what they were after. And it both helped me a lot because I had so much fun doing it, but it also got me a lot of recognition because the customers were loving what I did. They liked having me there. They liked working with me. And the management could also see that, hey, she's good at this. And this is actually something that a lot of people don't want to do or aren't, who are engineers. Like they just want to sit at the computer and code and leave me alone, give me a good specification, and I'll do it.
Right. But so what you just said there is really powerful and priceless. So those questions that are just naturally in your head, that as you're coming to work every day, like, I find it fascinating, at least at this point in my career, because I guess I never understood in those early years, because I didn't have anyone to kind of help me navigate that those questions that are naturally coming to you are, I would say that there's not only a sign of leadership, but it is also, I'll say, a higher level problem solving process to go through. Like you said, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go to work and I'm going to be at my desk, and, just, use this computer to just work on the work. Like you're working on the work, but you're also like, it's like a meta problem solving process.
I think a lot because of my personality type, like I'm a INTP. So, I mean, I've always kind of been off in, a different space of seeing things, and the purpose and behind something is always very important to me. Like, why do we do this? And I have to have some kind of why, or I'm not very motivated.
Right. Well, kind of like the gas pump situation.
Yeah.
Like you were asking, like, oh my gosh, there's like a resource here. Time is a resource.
Yeah.
Like, what can I do with this? Interesting. All right. Take us, like, I'm loving these stories. Take us further.
Right. Well, so that point I started getting some recognition from leadership. And one thing that was absolutely fantastic about General Motors, Delphi, Delco, those companies at that time is they had, I believe it was in the 70s, a lawsuit on equal opportunity. And so through the 80s and 90s, they had started building a lot of career transition and building programs to support both women as well as other minorities in the work. And I really benefited from that early in my career because I got recognized, hey, here's a minority who has potential. And so I had a lot of fantastic mentors. I got to, and they had, I think GM Delphi had one of the better career development programs I'd seen, where they looked at, okay, what are our top positions and what knowledge and experience do you need to have to reach those? And so they had career transition or career wheels or programs or things that would show you, like, from the time you began as a starting engineer, if you wanted to go on different paths, what type of experiences you should look for and have to be there. And a couple things from that, I think, really benefited me. That first of all, they really pushed that you did cross-discipline. Okay, you're an engineer. So, you need to do something other than engineering. It might be manufacturing or sales or project management or finance. But get out of what you do to understand it. They also wanted you to go international. Work in, it was an international company. Work somewhere else. Understand the way they work. And then they had these stretch things that they threw you in, kind of a bit above your head, outside of your expertise and knowledge, to see how you did. And so I started kind of already at that point, they were tagging me into that. And I got to go on a fellowship. I got to go for my master's to Stanford that they paid for.
Nice.
And not only did they pay tuition, but they gave me half my salary and a computer allowance and books and all kinds of benefits with it as well.
Was that what you were doing full time then?
What?
You were doing that education full
Yep.
time?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So
Nice.
it was, I still think it's probably one of the most generous programs there is for leader development that they had then. So, they had like all these different things that you should do, but a few people each year got selected for the fellowship and
Oh.
got this tuition paid. You got to go to school full time. And a lot of the leaders of GM were fellows. If you look at Mary Barra, who's currently head of GM, she was a Sloan Fellow to Stanford, paid by General Motors. And they were very good at building their own leadership, which I think is why we see Mary Barra there today.
So that's interesting. So then you go off to get additional education. Is there an expectation for coming back and doing anything?
Yeah, it was time for time, though, which again was really generous. And when I came out of Stanford, which I'll say Stanford was an amazing experience because I got to be there 99, 2000, which was kind of a real height of the dot-com. I mean, basically, if you went into any venture capitalist with a hockey stick, you would get funding. And then it crashed that summer. And so the fall I was finishing up my program, it was a quite tough time. But still, when I finished there, a lot of people were like, why don't you stay? Why don't you forget this? A company will buy you out. It's no problem. And I was kind of, well, I feel like GM Delphi did a lot for me. I want to go back and do that. But then I had a class at Stanford that kind of shaped the rest of my life. It was global project coordination. It was taught Professor Kosnick and Ramfelt. Kosnick was from Stanford and Ramfelt was from KTH in Stockholm. And the class was basically pulling students from both those universities. They pulled a group of kids from Stanford and a group both from the business school and engineering school in Stockholm. And we did a project together. And as part of that project class, I got to go to Stockholm for a week. They came to Stanford too. But then I had to do a summer internship after that. And luckily, Delphi had an office in Gothenburg on the other side of Sweden. So I said, hey, I've already got my air ticket paid for. It's not going to cost you anything extra. I'll find my own housing. Can I spend the summer, get the internship in Gothenburg? And yeah, it worked out because my old team had known people that worked there. And so I ended up getting an internship there that really set a lot of the future of my life and my connection to Sweden.
Wow. And you just had the courage to ask because that was just something obviously, personal to you. It wasn't on the table until you had the courage to say, hey, why don't we turn it into this?
That's I just saw it as kind of an opportunity that, hey, it would be good for everyone at that point because it wouldn't be any cost for it. And that was something I kind of learned a lot early. And it was somebody who helped me applying for the fellowship is when you want something, you need to present it and think in terms of how it benefits the other, not just what you want, but how does it benefit the company? And it was kind of, hey, then I can build a connection to people there in Sweden. And I didn't know it would lead to the next almost 20 years in Sweden. But at that point, I thought, a summer internship there it's just good, right? And it's no cost. And so everyone wins.
Wow. So an important seed was planted.
Yep. Yeah.
So how was 20 years in Sweden for you?
It was fantastic. When I finished Stanford, I had a couple different opportunities, and a lot of my classmates thought I was crazy heading back to the auto industry. There was so much opportunity in .com. Like, I'd have a title like project manager and they were vice president. But I was offered an assignment in Sweden to work with, it was then Saab Automobile, which no longer exists, but those wonderful, funky, cool cars.
Yep.
Delphi had a project with them and I went over. My job was to be a system engineer. And within a week of landing, the program was in crisis. They needed somebody to front the entire program for the company to the customer. And they asked me if I'd want to give it a try. So here I am, 26 years old. I'm just kind of sorting out my new apartment in life. And I thought I was going to be a system engineer, but hey, I'm going to be program manager for this. It was something like 10 components across 6 countries, a huge business. And the customer wanted one voice. They wanted one person with them that they could kind of speak to instead of speaking to people in England, people in Germany, people in the US and Singapore and Mexico. They wanted kind of a face. And that was me.
Wow, that is cool.
It was amazing. Like, it was tough. I worked like 100-hour weeks at some point. Like the weeks when we launched the car in Stockholm, we had some issues with the navigation system. And I think I slept 2 or 3 hours a night during that time. But it really some amazing experiences that helped kind of set me up in a lot of my career and what I wanted to do.
Cool. So where did it take you?
Well, at that point, I still thought I wanted to be like a CEO or top senior leadership. Like, that was in my goal, that I want to achieve this in my early 30s. And so when I came home from there, we were talking about those various career opportunities. And some of my mentors said, well, Sarah, you've got great program management, you've got great engineering, but the factory is where our money's made. You need to get some time in a factory. Ooh. So I took a year as a first line supervisor in a UAW auto plant, auto electronics, I'll say.
That's in Indiana. Different.
Yeah. And I'd say it was both. It was probably one of the worst years of my life, from getting up at 2 a.m, driving in a snowstorm and dealing with, sometimes threats on your person and life from the union. But, it's also, I'd say, one of the most beneficial experiences I've had, because in all the years after, like, I can walk into a factory and I can talk to the workers there. I can talk to the people there. I can look at compromises and things. So even though it was a year, I'll say I pretty much hated every day of it. Wow. I'm really, really glad I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What an experience.
Yeah. And then at that point, I'd moved back to the US from Sweden after the years in Saab. And I kept a little contact with a guy I'd met at Saab. It was just kind of a little professional contact. But at the point my year in operations was wrapping up, I was taking a new assignment, working both with South America on a program and also with a customer in Germany. And I got a text from this guy that I'd worked with, and he said, thanks for the Christmas card. I send Christmas cards to everybody. But he said, I'm moving to Germany from Italy. Would you? And I said, I'm booking a business trip right now to Germany. Want to meet up on Sunday and have lunch? And he said, come Saturday, there's a group of us skiing and let's go. And that started off what really I never thought would happen, but the guy who ended up as my husband, through a course of a year, we were kind of dating from a distance, and I'd say even exploring very cautiously, because he worked at General Motors. I worked at Delphi at that point, which was separate. And because we were both management level, we would have had to report the relationship. And it's like, okay, we want to make sure we're really certain, because you don't want to go into your boss and say like, oh yeah, I'm dating a customer, and
right.
Then, oh, well, a week later, now it's over.
It didn't work out.
Yeah. So it took us about 6 months to decide we were actually going to date.
Aw, that's awesome.
And then we got together. I moved with him to Germany. He was in Germany at the time. And luckily, some people I'd worked with at Saab, I visited the local office there when I was visiting him. And they said, hey, would you want to do the same thing you did at Saab with us now at Opel? Because they had a big infotainment project. And I said, yeah, I'm actually looking to move to Germany. And so they needed me to be kind of the technical program manager and lead interface to the customer. So I got that.
Perfect. Everything lining up.
Yeah. So then worked there for 2 years. We moved back to Sweden for personal reasons with my husband, and I commuted to Germany. At that point, I got my stretch assignment.
Okay.
I was offered to take over a rollout of SAP in Delphi's European divisions.
Nice.
And, it was something I knew absolutely nothing about, but my mentor had actually done a global rollout several years ago. And she's like, Sarah, that you can do this. It's a great opportunity because you'll get to understand the business in no way you ever would working in engineering or program management. And she's like, I know you have the leadership skills to do it. And so she worked on me for a while, and it was also a way to get the promotion to management level too. It would come with that assignment because, you need to have strategic visibility and be placed at a certain level to kind of get respect and get things done. So I took it. I was still on the path of, I want to be a CEO. And it was a great assignment. It really stretched me a lot, but it also helped me see, I don't think I like it here.
Oh.
And because I spent an awful lot of time with the top leaders of the company and talking with them what they did and saw the work they did. And I was like, that's not what I want. And so then I started going through a pretty big crisis. Like, I've been working all these years like crazy because I want to be like at least CEO or at least like CTO or something. Now, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it was a quite tough time. I ended up, my husband and I were also trying to have a child at that point, and it wasn't going real well. When two people are flying around the world, it's kind of hard to get a baby. So I decided after the SAP project kept getting delayed because of infrastructure and IT issues in the company. They'd outsourced IT. And after, I think it was the third delay, I said, I can't stay with this anymore for personal reasons. I need to do something else, or, I need to kind of focus on a family because I was 34 at that point. Your age starts getting to you.
Yes.
And, so I stepped out of that assignment and got a reasonable assignment, like working with technological training for the company and helping to build that infrastructure and areas of expertise in the company. How do you work with that and share it and manage it? And it was really just so I'd stay in the company and also so I could focus on traveling less and working less. And so we ended up getting my daughter. I think it was the first day of vacation after I stepped out of the role. So stress can play a role in whether you conceive or not. I'll say that.
Well, this is interesting too, because it sounds like you were in a point where you knew what you didn't want on from a career standpoint.
Yeah.
It sounds like you knew what you wanted from a personal standpoint.
Exactly. And we decided, this is the point to focus on that. And my husband and I, we'd been kind of, I'll say I was probably even ahead of him at that point in a career because I had all these good assignments and things, whereas he'd spent his entire career in one path. But at that point, we decided we follow your career because we weren't sure at that point. We were kind of bouncing back and forth. And then we said, okay, you want to go senior leadership. I know I don't. And then, okay, let's try to have a family and see if we can get that to work. And then I'll figure out what I'm going to do.
That is so cool.
And so we had our daughter. It wasn't easy. I almost died with the delivery and then had severe postpartum. But thankfully, Sweden has long parental leave. Nice. In fact, you can't get your child in daycare until they're over a year old, which was a shock to me. Coming from the U.S., I
didn't know that.
Most of my friends were back to work between 6 weeks and 6 months, depending on, financial and job and whatever. And so I just kind of assumed, I'd get daycare. And then it was like, I found out I can't get daycare until my child's at least a year.
Wow. I love it.
Good for me. It was
Yeah.
really good because it gave me kind of time to sort out some of my own stuff. It gave me time with my daughter that, you know, in like looking back in retrospect and talking to my friends who were always running one place and another when they weren't even, let's say, feeling that well. I mean, face it, like having a child is tough.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
it
I mean,
is.
physically and mentally, even if you don't have like complications. And
Right.
then to go back into work and pump and, and run around. And then a lot of people are always saying to you, like, oh, you should be at home with your child. You should spend more time in, all the judgments and things. And it was like,
Right.
I was glad I had that year in Sweden. And
Well, when did you were you pregnant when you found out about the 1 year until daycare, or did you already have your daughter? When did that
I was
come?
pregnant.
Interesting.
Yeah, because we just decided we want to have a child. We need to do it quick. We need to do it now because we're getting older. And then it was like we just moved back to Sweden and I started researching more. And it was, wow, okay, I'm going to be home for a year.
Wow.
And then I found out a lot of people are home 2 years. Or they split it like 6 months, each parent, or, and it was like, whoa, there are all these guys staying home with their kids.
Oh my God, revolutionary.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, wow. And then there was actually the thought in the office that really was interesting to me, that people who've been home in parental leave are much better in the office. What? They have more pay. And a lot of I found out, some of my colleagues told me, like Telia, the big telecom, apparently looks for people who take parental leave for leadership. Because if you can manage, I mean, think about it. If you can manage a screaming 6-year-old or a toddler or something, working with a team, it gets pretty easy, right? Because you can actually negotiate with adults usually, whereas that 6-month-old or whatever, but they felt it taught important skills. And so I was like, I'm so happy I'm in Sweden. And I'm so happy I don't have to fight with,
the culture and the societal influences, because on the inside, I know what becoming a parent was one of the most important advancements in my career because of exactly what you're saying. I learned so many skills just by being a mother that I could take in to work that I would not have learned otherwise, or wasn't learning.
Yeah. And it was so fascinating talking to like Swedish managers and leaders that, hey, we look for this. And this is something that we feel makes people better leaders. Whereas I was hearing at times from some of the Americans and Germans, like, just get a nanny, go back to work. And, and it's like, well, we didn't have our daughter to pass her off to somebody else.
Right.
It's like, and where I am a lot now is, I can work for another 30 years, but I only have my daughter for, is it 18 or 20 or, you don't know how many years it is, but it's not that many.
Yeah.
So
at a very pivotal point in their development, it's parenting.
Yeah. So I'm so grateful I got to be in Sweden at that point. And then I did go back to work when my daughter, after about 1 year and 3 months, I think we got her a place in the daycare and got it started out. And I started pretty easy. I went into hardware project manager. But then shortly thereafter, I was asked to take over an active safety team. It was a very small team at that point in Sweden. But they knew it was going to be a big growth area, and they wanted a kind of experienced leader there. And I had avoided safety really most of my career because the thing I really liked with infotainment systems is they don't kill people. I mean, and I always thought, like, if we had a bug or an error, we missed something. At worst case, like your music doesn't play, or, your Bluetooth phone doesn't connect, or you lost your connectivity and maybe you're a bit lost. But you have to be pretty imaginative. And believe me, I've thought of this, the ways that an infotainment system could kill somebody. Right. So the safety, it really scared me a lot going into it, because I thought, if we screw up, we can kill people.
Yeah.
And so I had some dialogue about that, but then it was also, we can save people too with what we do. And isn't it better to have somebody who thinks about this working with it? And so I went into that path, and that was a fantastic journey. The team was, I think it was 9 to 10 people when I joined, half were consultants. At the time I left, we were 75 people, almost all employees, and I built a student pool of around 20 that we were using, kind of like co-op students, that they would work part-time. And then when they graduated, we could feed them into the engineering positions we had. And so over about those 3.5 years, I worked to build that organization, and it was tremendous fun.
Wow. That's really cool.
I realized I really like building organizations and building teams. And in a way, it was like my research lab. Like, I read all this stuff coming out of Stanford and Harvard and all the business schools about how teams work, how energy is, how to motivate people. And I have my own research lab right there. I could test things. I could come in the morning and see, okay, if I come in quietly and sneak into my office, how's the energy in the office that day? What if I come in and I greet people? How is the energy that day? And how can I act in this situation and that situation? And I also really started working that a lot. It started with the work from Marcus Buckingham and Gallup on putting people in the right places. And as I was building the team, I had a chance to form teams that you could say fit together more like puzzle pieces. The conventional approach that I'd heard of recruiting to that point was a lot, here you have this job, it's square. A system engineer does this. A software engineer does this. The thing is, people are never squares. And I'm probably one of the weirdest ones that's all over the place. But when you just try to recruit squares, and particularly if you're looking for people who've done those things, you have to spend a lot of energy motivating them. Whereas if you look at what's the potential somebody has to do something and how does it fit in the puzzle of an overall team, you can get people that are intrinsically motivated. You get them kind of doing the things they want to get up and do in the morning. And then you don't have to have fancy banners and slogans and t-shirts and all those things, because people are just excited about the work they do and the value it provides. And so I really started experimenting with it as I built that team and organization. And that led me a lot into the journey with being the leadership coach and working with high-performing teams. Because, one example, I had a guy in the team, he'd worked with me back in the Saab days. Amazing person. I could trust him with anything. And I brought him into one of these square roles that I had in my team and put him in it. And after a couple months, it was kind of, I noticed his energy wasn't good and the performance wasn't that great. And so we had a talk, and I said, hey, I noticed you're not real into this. And I'm not. And we talked about what were the things that he loved it at the time he'd worked with me before, because I said, you were one of the top performers I've ever seen in that role. What is missing? And so then we were able to shape his job and tasks to get him. And so it started to get me into this thing of, there aren't a lot of bad performers at work, in the sense of almost everyone wants to do a good job. They want to contribute. They want to add value. But what are they doing every day, and what's their energy around it? Are they excited about it? Do they feel they're contributing? Are they bringing themselves into their work? If they're not, then they're probably not performing well. You're going to have to motivate them. They're the people that might be late or sick a lot and things. And then it's not that they're bad. It's they're not doing the right work. So then I started bringing that a lot more forward into teams and organizations. And that's a lot of what I do today, is kind of, what is it? What is that thing that gets you up in the morning, gets you excited? And how can you shape your job? A lot of times we don't have to change title. We don't have to change salary, but we can change the things we work with. And we can be a whole lot more excited about it And then we're going to perform well. And then we can have the salary, bonus, promotions, raises, all those things that follow.
That is so fascinating. So clearly, definitely a lot of compassion and inclusivity to bring yourself to the point where you can see the change in performance and results. But then to have that conversation, I have to imagine what it would be like. I could say that there's probably not that many, if any, leaders in my experience that brought me in and had a conversation like that. That must have been wonderful on both sides. On your side, to have the space and the capacity to do that for someone, and for someone to feel that, and to be in that pivotal moment where they can get out of the box, literally, of the role of their job, and to make it whatever they want it to be.
Yeah, and that's something I'm very proud that I've never fired anybody in all my career.
Wow.
I have helped people transition because they may not be the right fit for my job, my company, my team culture, the project we're working on. But that doesn't mean that, why do we have to fire? Why don't we just have an honest, frank conversation that, hey, maybe both of us aren't happy here. What can we do to get a better situation? Help somebody find a job that's a good fit for them. Help transition them to a company that the culture might match. And that's what I've done a lot in the years since, as I worked for the Geely, the company that bought Volvo, had an engineering center in Gothenburg, bringing together Chinese and Swedish expertise. And I built several teams within that and worked with quite a bit of stuff. And a lot of what I did there is somebody the right person to solve this problem that I have here? And if they are, that's a great recruit. If they're not, how can we help them solve the problem they want to solve? Within my network, within my contacts, there are people that do solve those problems, but it's not right here, right now. And I think that's what I want to drive with the compassion and inclusivity is, let's talk about these things. Let's get it on the table. Let's help each other find those places we can show up to work and just be passionate about what we do, that we don't need a t-shirt or things to make us excited because, hey, we're solving the problem we want to solve.
Yeah, that personal satisfaction of basically, this part where you're delivering results or getting results. You're solving problems.
Almost every human, we get up in the morning, we want to contribute. We want to be part of something bigger than us. We do it in hundreds of different ways, and I could get into all that from culture, but I won't. But, it's, if we can tap into that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Think about the energy
that
people can have for what they do.
So where does this take us? If we can get more leaders on board, definitely from a global perspective, what does the future hold for us when we can help more leaders, operate in a capacity where they're more compassionate and inclusive?
I would like to see that we can come to workplaces with much less burnout, and also it comes back to results. When people are excited and they're giving the best of themselves, particularly when they're in a team that they complement each other, they fill the gaps that each person has, they can achieve amazing things. I mean, we're not talking about like twice productivity or 3 times productivity. We're talking tens or hundreds, whether it's creativity or innovation or quality or customer service, all those things benefit from people believing in what they do, people complimenting each other and recognizing that I on my own can't do everything. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but as a team, we can.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's a dream for me, and I want to be part of making it happen. I've formed a couple teams. I've been part of a couple teams where I've seen that happen, and what they achieve is just amazing.
Yeah. Totally transformative.
I had a small team at that joint venture that I mentioned that in a very short time designed a complex system with intellectual property in it that was even interesting to other groups and divisions. it was thought it would be impossible, but it was very good people that have brought together different expertise. We'd spent some time in training and talking about differences and how do we use differences in a positive way rather than getting upset about them or judging other people. And they flew. I mean, I really didn't have my hand in that group hardly at all. I just gave them a few basic tools and they ran. And what they ran with was amazing. It won a company award.
Wow.
As well as, creating a product that, was thought to take months or years even to develop. But they did it in such a good, high quality way because of that difference that they brought together and the respect they had for each other.
Wow. I love the respect, but also when I listen to you tell this story, there's a sense of pride. I have to imagine being a part of that team and accomplishing something that was thought to be impossible. There's got to be amazing pride that comes with that, which is really intangible.
Yeah, I wasn't part of that team, but I know the people who were part of it, they posted quite a lot when it came out. And when they won the award, they were extremely proud of what they achieved. And a lot of them said it was some of the most fun they had at work yet in their career. They worked incredibly hard, the sacrifices they put in.
Yeah.
But it was fun because it's fun to do something amazing.
It's
fun
it is.
to be part of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you have an inspirational quote that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I do. And this quote came about, I read it at a time when I'd been pretty beaten down in my career. I'd been through, it was a tough situation, and I was trying to decide what role I should play. And I'd been offered an opportunity in senior leadership, and I was trying to decide if I could should take it. Because I'd been pretty beaten down, I wasn't, I didn't have a whole lot of belief in myself at that point. But I was lucky. I read Brene Brown's Daring Greatly when I was on a business trip flying back from China. And I had, I think, 6 hours in Frankfurt Airport Lounge, and I was sitting reading the book. And I'm going to pull the quote from it that's actually Theodore Roosevelt, because it was reading that and thinking about it that made me get up again and realize that the things I have to offer are worth any pain I can feel. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong woman stumbles. I modified this a little. Or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the woman who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the needs? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I've had this on my wall, and I've shared it with some of the women in particular that I work with that question, should I be there? It's painful, it hurts. Yeah, it does. But we need to be there. And at least I want to be one that goes out saying, I dared greatly.
Wow. Sarah, that was so powerful. Chills all over. Thank you so much for the modification. That is one of my favorites as well, and you delivered it so beautifully. It's really, really important to hear those words and to just reiterate them from many different perspectives, because it's real.
Yeah.
It's very, very real.
Yeah. And I realized I've been so afraid of failing, but that I don't want that to hold me back.
Right.
And so
Right.
every time now I get scared. I think, should I be here? Should I do this? Sometimes I've got a printout here that I put on my wall at times. And sometimes I sit in my office and just read through it. And like now, I pretty much always have a good cry when I realize, no, I want to be the one who dared greatly.
Yes. Yeah. Because this is my life and this is my opportunity to make my impact on the world so that the future has possibility and can see, because we are changing the landscape just like the women 100 years ago or thousands of years ago did.
Yeah.
So without us being in that arena and daring greatly, we may limit some possibilities for the leaders of the future. And I don't want to be that woman. I want to be the one that dares greatly.
Exactly.
Awesome. That was really beautiful. I mean, I could talk to you forever. The stories have been amazing. So I know there is, and I will include this in the show notes, you have a free ebook, and I'll share the link once again. The title is The 5 Things I Wish I Would Have Known When I Started Working as a Woman Engineer.
Yep.
So I'll make sure I have that in the notes so that people can easily get in contact with you and experience a lot more from you. Thank you so much for all that you do and you continue to do.
Thank you, Maria. It's been a pleasure being on here today talking with you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Coffee Time with Kauffman is the comfortable place to discuss women's leadership because I am on a mission to help the world discover the truth about what women are capable of. When you are ready for your leadership mastery makeover, go to mariakaufman.com and click on Consult a Coach, where you can schedule time with me for an empowerment session. Have a great week. Enjoy your adventures and journey responsibly. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Maria.